Reviewing my pre-market analysis for the week that just ended, so starting 9th of September, and analyzing and reviewing my prediction for the day and how price played out. Also noting any missed trades or potential trades that I could have taken during that time, based on higher time frame POIs. So going into the week, I was predicting price to be bearish. I was anticipating price I wanted to see the weekly time frame fair value gap, which is this fair value gap right here, the consequent encroachment, to clear and also tap into the low of the fair value gap, and ideally come and hold the low of this 19th of August candle, which also happens to be in the 50% in the discount of that range. So that was my prediction going into the week. I was also predicting price to find some kind of a support on the first daily time frame fair value gap at 1.3075 to 1.3055. But still, my long-term prediction was the weekly time frame fair value gap's consequent encroachment, especially with the daily time frame fair value gap at 1.3 right below that. I wanted price to come and tap those levels. Going into Monday, we had this strong bearish candle on Friday, and I was predicting price to come either to this fair value gap right and find resistance, or find resistance at this 60 fair value gap, which also happens to be above this swing high, which is exactly what price does during Asian session. And by the time London was open, we had started to displace. I saw this order block, so if I'm anticipating price to come down to these fair value gaps, especially with this equal low on the 240 time frame, I was waiting for price to take out this order block. Let me just draw on liquidity. So yeah, I noted this order block on 60-minute, and as price approached that, I was predicting price might hold that, pull back into this displacement 618. And look for shorting opportunities there down to this drawn liquidity. As price tapped into that order block, I took a long just here at this pin bar, and I exited the trade straight away because of the fact that we didn't test the order blocks 50%, which is something that I want to see before looking for any long opportunities. And then I took a long as this candle was printing at 310, and took my targets off around here, I believe. Again, that was an aggressive entry because I took that trade because of the fact that we put in a pause candle, came down to the 60-minute order blocks consequent encroachment, and then put in this bearish engulfing candle, which is a sharp turn for me. And that was I took a 0.8% trade. Then price displaced lower, and this was towards the end of London session. And because we put in this pattern where we pause candle, again closed below with a fair value gap, and then price closed above that fair value gap, I took a long entry here, mainly because this is when manipulation happens. Price will potentially find support. Drawn liquidity is down there still. Price will potentially find support, pull back into this range, and then displace lower. And then again, I exited my trade at a 1-to-1. Then we eventually reached that drawn liquidity where we could have taken more long opportunities, but by then it was New York session. I didn't want to take any trades. So yeah, going into Tuesday, I was bearish after this Monday bearish close. I was still predicting price might come down to, the consequent encroachment of the weekly time frame fair value gap and tap into the daily time frame fair value gap below that. And because we come into on the lower time frame, the daily time frame fair value gap is 50%, the first one. I was watching for any bullish momentum because we could potentially find support there as well. I was watching these two fair value gaps on the 240 time frame, predicting maybe price will come into either this level and then push down, or come back up to this level and then push lower. However, this deep fair value gap is quite far away in comparison to where we are right now. We have this order block to go through, and also this strong fair value gap. And yeah, let's see how market played out. On the 60-minute, we took out liquidity of this high Monday, and then we displaced lower, and I was predicting maybe we'll come back into this range. We have that fair value gap there as well, inside the discount area, and find some resistance. However, on the 60-minute, we started to see this where price put in a fair value gap, bullish fair value gap, which to me was showing that it could be potentially a bullish, order flow clicking in. But price comes up here to this 240 fair value gap, wicks above, holds this order block on the 60-minute, takes liquidity off this high, which becomes a liquidity, off on the 240, which essentially creates equal highs below this fair value gap. And then price displaces, forms this double top kind of pattern, holds this fair value gap right there, pushes up, and then displaces lower. So when I was watching this on the 60-minute, because we took out liquidity of this high, swing high, and displaced lower, I didn't really want price to come back up and take out liquidity again. However, because of that mindset going into the day, I completely ignored everything else and we did not look for opportunities, especially because we rejected a daily time frame fair value gaps 50% and displaced higher with fair value gap here and bullish fair value gap right here as well. And then price doesn't hold that fair value gap on the way back down, where it holds once, fails to push higher, and then displaces lower. And after seeing that, my prediction continued to be these weekly time frame fair value gaps, consequent encroachment. So yeah, even if there is a liquidity taken out on 60, right, it doesn't mean that price cannot come back and take out that high one more time, especially when it is just going to be a liquidity grab on the 240 below a fair value gap. Because price came in, took out liquidity off that high. It came in, firstly, it made a high right there, and then took out liquidity off that high, displaced lower, held that bullish fair value gap first, and then pushed high and then displaced again before continuing lower during New York session. Then price comes to the low of that daily time frame fair value gap, consolidates, makes a swing, takes out that swing first, displaces, comes back, displaces, takes out that swing one more time during London close, and then continues to push higher. And then we closed the next day with a doji candle at that daily time frame fair value gap. Tomorrow is CPI, so I was hesitant on Wednesday's CPI, so I was hesitant on looking for any opportunities going into the day, especially towards end of London session and New York session, start of New York session. On Wednesday morning during London session, I saw price come up to this range on 60-minute and the 240 and tapped into this 240 fair value gaps 50%. What I was predicting was, because it's CPI day and on the higher time frame we have been bearish since this rejection on the daily anyway, I was predicting maybe price will come deeper into this range and then push lower during CPI and continue bearish to clear out the weekly time frame fair value gap. Because of that, I wanted to take this trade down to somewhere inside this range where we'll find support and then push up before maybe New York open, before CPI. So I took a trade after this displacement, fair value gaps, another displacement, and then I took an entry on the pullback down to this low, and I got out with, I know it says 2, but I got out around 0.5 R because I took position 1 off, all of my position off at around this breakout, mainly because it's CPI and not knowing what market might do later on during the day. But it seems I ignored the high time frame bias, especially the weekly time frame bias, where we've been in a strong bullish order flow, and then instead of price pushing up during CPI, it pushes down and then finds support at this daily time frame, the second one, which is a much stronger one, fair value gaps, consequent encroachment. And this is where I missed my trade, mainly because I was looking at 1,000 different other pairs and they were all doing the same thing, and it was a bit overwhelming. So we had a swing, price come and took out that swing at this 50%, displaced with this fair value gap. So honestly, an entry I would have been happy with entry at this candle right there, stop somewhere low, give myself enough room to breathe and take target 1-to-1. We never get that pullback either, so you'd have to get in that trade here. Normally I would get in at this aggressive candle, after this aggressive candle, this bullish candle, but because I wasn't looking at this pair, I was looking at 1,000 other pairs. My focus wasn't on here. It was on here as well, but it's difficult to be focused on one, a specific entry when you have 1,000 other things you opened up. So that's something I'm going to avoid going in the future. And then this is where price finds his strong support, because we took out that liquidity and then dropped lower. I was like, oh, maybe we'll continue lower, but I completely forgot where we were. And then this drop in price and this hold is just cementing the fact that we are, bullish. Going into Thursday, I was still bearish, especially because of the fact that on 240, we had this strong bearish displacement after taking out liquidity off this high. That's the third time it's taken that liquidity, by the way. One's here and then one again here, and then displaced lower. Because of this displacement, I was bearish, but look where we are. We took out, a buy side liquidity, weekly time frame fair value gaps, consequent encroachment, daily time frame fair value gaps, consequent encroachment. That also happens to be the third daily time frame fair value gap. So pretty strong POI for price to hold, especially the fact that we put in this candle the day before, which is a candle that took out high and the low, which normally could potentially be a reversal candle depending on where it prints. Of course, those are the things I ignored on the day. So. And I didn't think about going long at this level. I took a short, so I was predicting price will come up to, there's a 240 fair value gap right here, which is in discount, and especially the way price displaced up with these fair value gaps holding, I was predicting price to first pull back into this range and then push up and then find some resistance and then drop down, not down to here, but at least drop down, somewhere inside the range. So I took a short around here, which was SMT with EU, and I was predicting price to come into this swing low, but I got out around this fair value gaps consequent encroachment, which is exactly where price finds support and then pushes up. I was looking for short at that 240 fair value gap, but seeing the way price has been holding this fair value gap after rejecting these fair value gaps on the higher time frames and the order flow on the daily time frame and weekly time frame, I zoomed out and noticed, the order flow is bullish. There is no way I should be taking shorting opportunities right now. Because of that, I just did not do anything this day. I just left the price to play itself out and show me its hand, because I didn't want to be in any trades when I didn't really know the direction of the market. And then Thursday closed with this strong bullish engulfing candle, and going into Friday I was looking for bullish trades. Going into Friday I was watching price, because it was so bullish on Thursday, I was anticipating price to come and find resistance at this daily time frame order block. And when I dropped to 240, we had price had already reached that order block when I in the morning during London session, before London session, and I was anticipating, we had this bullish fair value gap on the 240. We have multiple fair value gaps, so I wasn't expecting a deep retracement going into Friday morning, because of the way the price displaced up. And then it was better to drop down to the 1 hour time frame where there are other PDRAs, so such as I was watching this second fair value gap right there and anticipating price to come down to that, which also happens to be below this swing low on the 60-minute. So I was watching for that price to pull down to that level during London session, which it does. Finds support straight away immediately after taking these lows of the second fair value gap. And even better is price accumulates just before that range, takes out the range's lows, fair value gaps lows 50%, and then takes that low out with this bearish engulfing candle, which is exactly the kind of moves that I want to see before price finds some kind of a support, and then holds with that doji candle. And that would have been an entry for me, which I didn't enter, obviously, because I was again watching too many pairs. And this exact same move also happened on EU. I missed both of them because of the fact that I was watching too many things, and that's something going into next week I'm not going to do, because had I not been watching that many, I know, because I'd drawn this, I've placed my indicator and everything, was ready for this. I just didn't pull the trigger, which obviously is something that was happening. There was a psychological barrier that was keeping me from entering this trade, and the one thing that I can identify is the fact that I had way too many pairs on open this week. So Friday price finds support at that level and then pushes up, takes out New York high, pulls back again, and then takes out the highs from this morning, and then we start to display slower. So I stopped looking for trades. I wasn't going to go long short around this level, especially if it had tapped into that 50% off that order block. Then maybe I would have looked for some resistance, but it didn't. So the day was over for me, and that was my predictions going into the week. One of the key thing that this week was the fact that I missed a couple of trades, mainly because I had too many pairs open which were moving identical to each other, so Aussie dollar, Kiwi, pound dollar, and euro dollar. And because there were so many pairs I had to switch between, that I couldn't keep my focus on the ones that were providing A+ setups like this one. So definitely not looking at pairs next week, except for euro dollar and pound dollar. And yeah, let's see how next week performs.